Welcome, this is episode 2 of a series of interviews with John Shields. This is covering the abuse that he suffered, and more particularly his son suffered, at the hands of the Scottish State. The abuse covers many decades, and the story is very complex, so we're taking it carefully, piece by piece, and over a number of interviews. This is the second interview. It covers the time when John Shields Jr. was in the Mallard Care Home, up until the point where John rescued him from that institution. I have here the documentation, or summary of the documentation that we've obtained, and this is notes on files, letters, correspondence. So it's the official record to the extent that we've got access to it, and it gives a particular story. And that alone is very concerning. But John, as we go through this, I'll ask you to describe your recollection and conversations and things you recall to flesh out what's in the actual record. So we're starting here in October 1995. So this is before John Jr. was officially taken into care. This is during the trial period, the tester period. And a statement recorded from Mary Maguire, part-time care assistant at the Mallard. She said on 20th October, whilst showering John Shields, I noticed bruising on his body around the back of his legs. As I washed his buttocks, I noticed that there was bruising around his rectum. I turned off the shower, sat John in the toilet and called for Margaret Forbes, team leader for the shift. She came and had a look and confirmed what I had observed. She asked me to write a report on this. Now, that report seems to have oddly gone missing, but this was the first and perhaps one of the most serious reports of very substantial bruising on John. And arguments about this last for years over what's actually happened here. When did you discover this, and what was your initial response to this bruising?
This was discovered not so much at the time when the incidents were taking place. It was like there was an emergency child protection case discussion had been called very abruptly and very quickly on issues that had happened with John in the period between going into care, where he was in like a 6-week respite, and then the month of November, which actually, from what I've read and what I've seen, was an actual disaster for John that month. It was horrendous for the boy, what he'd went through that month. And it wasn't until I was led to believe that abuse had happened to John, where they'd called an emergency child protection case discussion on the 5th of December 1995, that I started to get the warning signs, something's happened here. But believe it or not, I was never informed. Even when the meeting took place, I was never informed. Even my ex-wife was never informed. We didn't know this meeting was being called because what had happened to John in this home, which led me to the state saying, wait a minute, if I'm not going to get told what's happening here, I'm going to have to find out what happened here. So I had to access these reports myself by getting access to John's files to discover what had happened in there, David. It was just a horrendous abuse that John had suffered in his, believe it or not, his first month. As you rightly said, 2nd of November he was taken into local authority care. And here he had an attack done on him on the 20th of October. And then in November we've got issues on 22nd of November, 27th of November, 30th of November. And then the 3rd of December we've got an emergency ADO attendant district officer flies out from Airdrie, where she was based, to the Mallard. And seemingly this lady, actually, it was the 27th of November when she appeared at the Mallard, because a phone call had been put forward that John had suffered abuse. as I said, and then just trying to get access to what was going on here was very, very difficult.
So there's a note in the file from the 4th of December 1995 from Sandy Russell. He was project manager at the Mallard. So he's talking about on return to work on the 23rd of October, the situation regarding bruising found on resident John Shields' lower legs and heels was brought to my attention by team leader John Garroway. John Shields' school been in contact with the Mallard requesting his footwear be changed. So he continues, on 24th of October 1995, team leader Margaret Forbes, when returning from days off, gave me a statement from care staff Mary Maguire regarding bruising noticed around John's rectum on the 20th of October 1995. I discussed the matter with Margaret. John has a habit of sitting with his feet tucked under him when watching television. Because of the fact that he'd been wearing his outdoor shoes constantly rather than slipper socks, it was felt, doesn't say by who, it was felt that the bruising could have been caused by this. John's mum was aware of this and agreed with the explanation. Now, he said that. We found much later a letter from North Lanarkshire Council to your ex-wife, dated 29th June 2001, which stated, you also wish to note that you did not at any time accept the explanation that was provided in relation to the bruising on John's buttocks. Notice not rectum, buttocks. So move the description a little bit. The explanation regarding him keeping his boots or shoes on did not convince. Consequently, the case record that states you accepted this explanation is wholly inaccurate and not your view. So it seems that that's likely a false statement as well. So the explanation was that because he sat with his feet tucked under him when watching television, which was habitual, which he presumably did before he went to the Mallard, in the Mallard he received very severe bruising in and around the rectum, which he'd never had before. This really doesn't seem to convince. So was this offered to you as an explanation?
To find out exactly what happened was, actually had me going up to North Lanarkshire social work department at Cumbernauld asking for access to John's files. When I accessed John's files in Cumbernauld was the first warning to me that someone was bad, because in these files there was a report, and the report stated about a young boy who had been examined by an attending district officer in the presence of a doctor, where internal bruising had been found. Buttocks had been checked for pressure points. So I knew then and there, this is something wrong. Now, when I accessed these files in Cumbernauld Social Work Department, strangest thing was, when I found these areas within the files, not one social worker would come in to where I was sitting in the office and explain to me what this meant, what these reports meant. I couldn't get a social worker to come into the room, David. None of them would come in and explain why there was talk of a wee boy who, 12-year-old, was found to have internal bruising, buttocks checked for pressure points. I says the excuses that was coming out was, to me, I couldn't believe. The fact that they were trying to say that he bounced up and down in his boots. It came to the stage that I heard this so much that I even had a pair of big boots myself, and I tried it and nearly broke my legs. It's impossible to do. But this is what they were trying to say had happened to John, that he'd been bouncing up and down in his shoes. But would that have called a case discussion because he bounced up and down in his shoes? I don't think so.
What, internal? Internal bruising is surely, prima facie evidence of sexual abuse.
Yeah, that's exactly
okay.
what.
So there's an attempt to deny this.
Yeah.
The 5th of December was the child protection case discussion. Right, now you didn't know this was happening, and one of the patterns we see here is you get all the state agencies get together, they have a conference, they decide what the truth is themselves, as though they're disinterested parties, which obviously they're not. And the parents are in the dark. So just to give you an idea how many people were at this, I'll give you the quick list. Eleanor Murray, area managed chairing. David Fletcher, senior social worker. Angela Gillis, social worker. Liz Brabender, district officer childcare. Francis Ross, ADO childcare. Dr. B. Gallagher, senior medical officer. Sergeant B. Welsh, Strathclyde Police. Paula Dudgeon, educational psychologist. June Island, health visitor. Sandy Russell, unit manager. Mary O'Brien, head teacher. Morag Black, instructor, Redburn School. Mark Smith, teacher, Redburn School. So all the state agencies are represented. The parents aren't represented, which is interesting. Now, the records of this contain several things which struck me as odd, and I'll take you through and get your comment on these. Firstly, the minute of the child protection case records that Angela Gillis stated, quote, both parents accepted John's placement here at Mallard in terms of Section 15 of the Social Work Scotland Act 1968. Angela pointed out, however, that this could change if Mr. Shields failed to cooperate, i.e. in terms of access. I actually don't really know what that means. I would point out, before I get you to respond, this is early December, right? He's only been in 6 weeks, right? So they've already got you as likely to fail to cooperate. So you're trouble. And they're talking quite clearly about Section 15. So they seem to believe at this point, rightly or wrongly, because we've never seen the paperwork on the Section 15, that at this point he's under Section 15 of the Social Work Scotland Act, which is voluntary, a voluntary measure. Do you have any idea what this could change if Mr. Shields fails to cooperate means?
This goes back to the fact that when they took John into care, there wasn't an illegal dialogue for them to take John into care. We were in shared care. I had an order given to me by Airdrie Sheriff Court allowing me access to John. When they took John into care, they done it on the basis I didn't exist. You know, for me to find out that John was taken into care was because illegally was done. Like, I was at my work one day, I got a phone call for a chap at that time at Strathclyde Regional Council. He phones me up and he goes like that to me, he says to me, your name is John Shields? And I'm like, yeah. He went like, he says, I work for Strathclyde Region and it's concerning your son John. And I went like, yeah. He went like, he says to me, who are you? And I went like, what do you mean, who am I? He went like, he says, he doesn't have a father. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, your boy John William Shields, 25/3/1983. I says, that's my son. He says, where is your son? I says, as far as I know, he's in care. He says, that's true. He says, but you don't have, he doesn't have a father. He says, who are you? And I'm like, why do you keep asking me that? I'm his father. He says, look, I've got you down here as an MIA. And everybody knows MIA means missing in action. He says, you're a father that doesn't exist. He says, you have to go and get a lawyer and find out how come this local authority have taken your boy, put him into care, you aren't anywhere to be seen. You're not on documents, you're not on anything. Who are you? And I went like, okay, that's fine, I will deal with that right away. So I did, and I went and found a lawyer, and all of a sudden, I'm starting to question local authorities, saying things like I said when we had the parent meeting, when we first done it, John was getting into care, I said, how are you doing this? I'm asking them a question, how are you managing to take my son into care without my permission? I'm his father, I'm not giving him up. And when I got the court thing, I thought this was great, I had somebody recognising me as father. So I'm actually recognised by the state as John's father. But here he is, in care, he's been abused, I've found out, and they're holding a big meeting, as you said there, you've read out all these people. What are they doing there? What were they meeting for? They never told me, I had to find out myself.
So they're certainly uneasy about the whole Section 15, and they're uneasy about you. So this is very early on, and they formed this view. So it goes on. It said, now one of the other things, this might be difficult, but I think we've got to go there. So Mr. Shields informed Angela that he suspected Jennifer, that's your daughter, of being responsible for bruising, as she had subsequently admitted to him hitting John. Now, this obviously was very controversial because another note was found from North Lanarkshire Social Work Department, again, 29th June 2001, to your ex-wife, states that in respect of any reference to your daughter Jennifer, you requested that this be deleted from the main file. All right, so your former wife has tried to expunge this from the record, but you were raising the issue that Jennifer had been hitting John and that relationship was not good. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the relationship with my daughter kind of broke down in the early days when John was taken into care. As I said, this incident was something I regret even talking to social work about it, because something had happened. The social work wanted to interview me concerning allegations about my daughter, and at that time I knew my daughter and my son didn't get on in the house. You know, Jennifer did hit him, and that was related back to me that this had been going on in the house. And I'd actually, through talking to this social worker, stated, I think my daughter hit my son. And, you know, this is what's going on in the house, and this is the breakdown between the mother, the daughter and the son in the house. I says, but revealing this to the social work was one of the worst things I've ever done, because all of a sudden, that same day, the social work department just shot down to my ex-wife's house, got tore into her about what Jennifer had done and hurt John. And as far as I knew, John was getting put on a register because what Jennifer was meant to do. Same day, my ex-wife phones me and she says to me, you were at social work today? And I'm like, I got called up. What for? Well, you turned around and you put Jennifer in the frame for assaulting John. And I went like, I never said I assaulted John. I says that she didn't get on with John, and she had been giving him, hitting him across the back. I says, that much I do know. I says, but I never said anything about John. And actually my ex-wife was threatening me with all legal sort of stuff. I says, but after that, as I said, that was just actually before John was taken into care that had happened.
So this brings us to another aspect of this, which is the application of blame, right? So we've got a not believable explanation from the authorities as to how the bruising occurred. And we're only weeks into their care of John. You and your wife, former wife, had been looking after John up until this point, which is, what age is he at this point? He's
12.
12, right? So you've managed for quite a long time, and we've not had this sort of bruising ever appearing on John before now, right? So the suggestion that it's parental seems odd, right? Just on the face of it, 12 years, no bruising. You put him into an institution, within the first couple of weeks, he's covered in bruises. What would you think, right? You wouldn't start immediately pointing fingers at the parents, I would suggest. It's not logical, but this is what they do. Let me read what they've stated. Francis Ross, speaking here, it was explained to Ms. Ross. Francis Ross stated after the child care review, she spoke further to the Mallard staff regarding the bruising. Staff explained that John had also bruising to the ankle, which seemed to support the theory that the bruising was sustained when he sat on his feet. So they're still pushing this. It was also explained to Ms. Ross that Mr. Shields had returned John to the Mallard after an access visit, had bathed him with the door locked, and both had left the bathroom. Sorry, and when both had left the bathroom, John's pyjama top was torn. The next day, John soiled himself, and when Mary Maguire was cleaning him, she noticed the bruising and reported this to senior staff. So without saying so, this is putting you in the frame. And one of the things, I read this, and because I know what happens later in the story, the parallels are remarkable. Impossible explanations is one. Here we have the suggestion that normal family life is somehow suspicious, problematic, or criminal, right? When you bathed your son, you locked the bathroom door. That would be a normal reaction. If you're in a public building and you're bathing your child, you wouldn't have the door unlocked normally, I would suggest. They've made it sound like, when they talk about the rip to the pyjamas, there's a suggestion, an implication of some sort of violence there, and then the way that the descriptions then carried on, it seems to imply cause and effect. So this is definitely putting you in the frame. Did you get this impression from him?
Oh, definitely. When it started to seep out what was going on here, I knew when they had this big meeting, all these people appearing, the Mallard were denying everything. This was nothing to do with them. The explanations became even wilder. But I could see that things were getting said, not directly to me, behind the scenes. I was leading it from the school. Even the school, there was a boy called Mark Smith who was at this meeting, and I actually went down to pick John up one day at his school, and the chap, Mark, says, "Can I have a chat with you?" And I'd went like that, "Sure, yeah, what is it?" He was an assistant teacher with John, and he took me into the staff room and he said, went like that to me, he says, "Listen, I'm warning you just now that they're after you." And I went like that to him. I says, "Who's after me? What's happened?" He says, "I was called up to a meeting at Cumbernauld Social Work Department. Myself, Morag Black and Mary O'Brien, who was the head teacher." And he says, "And what I heard up there disgusted me." I says, "What was the meeting about?" And he says, "Something's happened to John, and they're going to try to pin it on you." And I went like that to him. I actually says to him, I says, "Look, can you be a wee bit more specific of what they're going to be trying to do to me?" And he went like, "I can't. See if I find out." He says, "Well, sack me." He says, "It was the first time I've ever sat in a meeting like this, a case conference." He says, "And the things that they were saying was getting aimed at you and your partner, Janice." He says, he says, "And I know from watching you with John that your interaction with John, like John, John loves you. You know what I mean?" And he went like that, he says, "And I just couldn't believe what they were saying up there about you." He says, "And it made me, it sickened me the fact that nobody was going to tell you." But that's when the warning signals went up about North Lanarkshire Council and the Mallard, because what I'd discovered.
So, this event, Sandy Russell, unit manager of the Mallard, he said, "Mr. Russell pointed out it was not unusual for Mr. Shields to lock the bathroom whilst bathing John, and the tear in his pyjama top was very small. He felt neither of these issues was relevant to the investigation." So at least someone was speaking reasonably. Now, we then got another, you said that they were trying to smear not only you, but your partner, Janice. So this cropped up with, at this meeting, Liz Brabend, a district officer for childcare, who stated, quote, that it may be necessary at some time to refer John to the reporter, as she was concerned re allegations of Mr. Shields' partner hitting John. Now, I found this, looking at the files, I found this very odd, because I've seen allegations before and even smear campaigns and things. I've never seen something with so little evidence. It crops up 2 or 3 times that there are allegations. But it's not even that the allegations are not substantiated by significant evidence. They're not even described. It's just allegations. No one says who's meant to have done what, who's meant to have seen it. No one's saying who's even making the allegations. It's just, oh, there are allegations. And it keeps cropping up. And nowhere in the file is there anything. So, you mentioned that your partner Janice had been the target of this as well. Do you want to say anything more on that subject?
Well, at that time, it came to the stage like when you're dealing with social work department, trying to get truths out of social work department, it's a no-no. That doesn't work, especially if they know that they're getting backed into a corner. The people that were charged at that time come on all social work department. They make allegations. They have allegations every day against people where they never have proof of anything. Where the allegations came against my partner Janice at the time, was coming through one person. Well, only one person could have known or thought that this was happening in my house when John was staying with me, and that could only have been coming through my ex-wife. That is only one, because we were only ever visited once by social work, and that was to okay the house for John to stay in. That was only visitations that we got at that time, as I says. But when we were doing what we were doing, I was investigating, I was doing it the right way. I was getting the allegations sorted out by accessing documentation, wanting documentation. I must admit, I threatened court proceedings against North Lanarkshire Council if they didn't tell me what the hell was going on here. I just was not. But I could never ever accept, but I understand why they had to turn it on me and Janice. They had nowhere else to go. Nowhere else to go.
So Liz Brabender again at this meeting stated she was concerned that the placement, which would probably be long term, was in terms of Section 15 of the Social Work Scotland Act 1968, because it's voluntary. Angela Gill has stated that Section 15 legislation could prove difficult if Mr. Shields refused to give up midweek access and carried out his threat to remove John from the Mallard. If this situation arose, Angela felt the department would have to take control for John's sake, but felt there was no grounds to submit to the reporter at this time. Now, I think this is an extremely interesting comment, right? So the department who have placed John into care, where he's been abused and assaulted and has internal bruising in his rectum, view your threat to withdraw him from the place in which he's been abused as requiring them to take control for John's sake. I don't get that. And they're willing to do this even though there are no grounds to submit to the reporter at this time. So they have no legal basis for taking control for John's sake, and they're discussing taking control.
Yeah, but if you go back to the early days when they took John into care, it was a Section 25. It was deliberately given to me that John was only there on a voluntary basis. Voluntary basis means if my ex-wife believed everything that was going on in that home, she could walk in, just walk in and take him out, and they couldn't stop her. They couldn't stop her under a voluntary care order. Under the Section 25, they can't. But then again, they would never have got a Section 25 if, as the legal side it goes, they would have to have come to his father and says to his father, do you want John? That's the rules. They come and they offer the child to whoever the family member is. So the fact that she's stating Section 15 Section 15 never existed because it was Section 25. But Section 25 could not be issued because John had a father who wanted him, a father that wanted him to stay with him. I never gave or signed any documentation for John to be taken into care.
Another pattern that keeps coming up is this legal ambiguity, right? So all the documentation at this point says Section 15, 1968 Social Work Act of Scotland. All of it, and it doesn't mention Section 25. Now I know you've seen a document which we don't have a copy of, where you're listed as not applicable, and that's a care order Section 25. So we're certainly not clear as to whether it started off as a Section 15 and changed, or whether Section 15 was always a smokescreen. We don't really know. We'll try and find out more on that. Now, we've then got more, again at this meeting, more maligning of your partner Janice. Chair Eleanor Murray, the chair of the meeting, states that it was important that the department did not lose sight of the allegations that Mr. Shields' partner ill-treated John. She also agreed there were presently no grounds to refer the matter to the reporter. So again, there's no evidence, because if there was evidence, there'd be grounds to refer to the reporter. There are simply allegations, unstated, unspecified, we think from your ex-wife. Now, this again is, we'll see this pattern repeating later, that there are essentially a whispering campaign that goes into the itching ears of the social work department who believe it, even though there's nothing to substantiate it, this time against Janice. Your partner at the time, your wife now. Francis Ross, a couple of other quotes from the notes of this meeting. Francis Ross expressed her concern that Mr. and Mrs. Shields, meaning your ex-wife now, may react to this meeting by removing John. And Eleanor Murray confirmed that even if John was removed from the Mallard, it would still be difficult to provide grounds of lack of parental care. Yeah. Angela Gillis reiterated that Mrs. Shields had legal custody of John and only she had the right to remove him from the Mallard. So they're confirming there what you said about under Section 15, certainly your wife who had custody could remove John at any time. They're talking about grounds of lack of parental care. They're talking about grounds for taking John from, at this point, you and your ex-wife, and taking him into compulsory state care, and they're discussing the grounds. This seems to be remarkable because there was no problem when he was in the care of you and your ex-wife. Your ex-wife was struggling, your daughter was struggling, it was a difficult situation, but John wasn't receiving this sort of abuse and bruising, and he's weeks in the Mallard, he's in this state, and the discussion is all about how the state can act against you and your ex-wife. I find it just a remarkable, I see why the whistleblower who spoke to you spoke in the way he did. It's appalling. Eleanor Murray closed the meeting stating she was of the opinion there was insufficient evidence at this time to take the matter to a child protection case conference. So, there's no child protection case conference at this point, even though there's internal bruising in the rectum. That also, I think, is quite remarkable. Now, from the 1st of January 1996, the Mallard begins keeping injury logs of John Jr.'s bruises in response to this and other concerns raised by social work. The logs continue until the 29th of October 1999. There are a total of 162 injury logs. So before we go to the next part that's recorded in the documentation, do you want to say a little bit about these injury logs?
The injury logs, when the issues with John was happening. It was as if nobody wanted to trust anybody. Nobody could be trusted. There was also a social work hotline was part of the practice put in place for John, where if he came home with me and there was bruising on him, that was my duty. Phone the hotline, tell them I've recorded bruisings. These bruisings would be recorded, and what it is a picture of a body, and the X marks the spot, as I said. So this went on, and I've got to be perfectly honest, it got crazy because everybody concerning my son became terrified. They were all scared. The school, the Mallard, me, my ex-wife probably, we were all scared looking after a boy. To be put in that situation was shocking because even the school, I had a great rapport with the school. Now, there's actually a report that the school have concerning this issue of John having internal bruising, where they are blamed by the Mallard and the social work department for allowing my son to fall while on a bike. And while he was on the bike, the handlebar of the bike is meant to have penetrated my son's trousers and penetrated his anus. And this is reported in social work papers. It's in the log, it's in his file. This is what happened to my son while he was meant to be at school. And when I read it, I went like, oh, this is getting crazy, this is getting out of hand. I says, here we go. My son, is one of the things of the argument was like, I said, my son can't even go a bike. Never mind go on a bike. I says, he's meant to have been on a bike, fell off a bike, and the handlebars meant to penetrated right in his anus. This was discovered. And I says, who discovered it? No answer. When I seen the head teacher and she says, this is a piece of, I says, look, Mary O'Brien, the head teacher, I says, don't even take this into that this has happened at this school. I said, if that happened to my son, he would be in hospital just now. He would be in intensive care. I says, I will find out where the hell this statement came from. And to be honest with you, it came from the Mallard.
So any explanation that's not the Mallard will do?
Yeah.
Okay. So this takes us we're forward now to April 1996. There was more events there. So 19th of April 1996, John Jr. went on a weekend visit to his father at Janice's house. On the 20th at 9:30 in the morning, you contacted the Mallard to say that John was bruised on the back of his left leg, on his thigh and his left arm. Mr. Russell of the Mallard checked the log and noted bruising on the left-hand side of the left knee and gave this information to John Shields Sr. There was no indication on the log of how the bruising was sustained. The next day, 21st of April, John Jr. was returned to the Mallard by his father, who showed the staff the extensive bruising at the back of the left leg and between the knee and the buttock. The 22nd of April, Mrs. O'Brien, head teacher at Redburn School, telephoned the Mallard stating concern over the bruising on John Jr. and asking how it had been sustained. Staff were unable to give a reason. On the 24th April 96, there's a report by the nurse Anne Allington at John Jr.'s school. The nurse notices bruising on John's arms, and on telling the class teacher, she also informed the nurse that they'd already noticed bruising on his leg, which was logged as severe extensive bruising on left thigh, arm and buttock. The head teacher was made aware of these injuries. The head teacher contacted the Mallard for an explanation, but did not receive anything satisfactory. And on the 24th of April, child protection procedures were initiated by the social work department following a referral by S. Russell of the Mallard concerning the extensive bruising. And then that takes us to another, this time it's a child protection case conference. So before we get to that, do you have any, what recollection do you have of this bruising event?
Well, this is a story and a half. What happened here was like, John was coming home with me on a Friday, and I went to pick him up in the Mallard, And when I picked him up at the door, I'm like that to him. I says, God, my son looks great. They'd bathed him, washed him. He's looking spick and span. So myself, my wife, it was a lovely day. Me and Janice decided, let's take him down to Strathclyde Park. John loves down there. He goes on to the shows. With Shelley, my other stepdaughter, she was with us, and we decided to go to Strathclyde Park. So we're away down to Strathclyde Park, and John decides he needs a toilet. So there's a wee public toilet down there. This is before it's been developed, right? There's just one area. And I says to Janice, I need to take John to the toilet. So I went to take him into the toilet, and John wouldn't go through the door. And I'm like, got a problem here. So I thought, right, he doesn't want to go to the toilet, I'll see, we'll do it in the bushes. No, he wouldn't do nothing. And then I discovered he's wanting a bowel movement. So I'm in Strathclyde Park. I'm like, well, if I can't get him into the toilet, how am I going to get him into the toilet? No, I can't force him, because he's a big boy. And I says, right, Janice, come on, in the car, we're going home. So I had to go from Strathclyde Park to Moodiesburn in 10-15 minutes. I must have battered it up that motorway. So I got him into the house, and I take him into the toilet, and I say, okay, turn around, sit down, and all of a sudden he's not doing this for me. I'm like, Janice, I say to Janice, I've got a problem here. I says, you won't even let me take his trousers down or not. So anyway, eventually I says, look son, the only way you're going to do this toilet is to sit down. So I just took his trousers and yanked him down, and I went like, oh shit. And that wasn't a specific thing. And he done that, and I went like, oh my God. And one cheek was just multicoloured. And he couldn't sit in anything to do the toilet. He couldn't sit down. This is why he was acting the way he was. He wasn't going to do it. He didn't want to sit on the seat because he was too sore. So I had to kind of hold him and let him do the toilet for a distance, right? And then I went like to Janice, I said, look at this, and then I lifted his jumper up, and the bruising went right up one side of his back. I looked at his calf area down here, his leg, down the back of his thigh was just multicoloured bruising. And I'm sitting there, this was maybe 11, 12 o'clock, I'm sitting there like, how the hell could they have let me take him out of home looking like that? So
this was a Friday.
Yeah.
So multicoloured, that means the bruising's happened
4 days before.
Days before, yeah.
So what happened was I phoned a Mallard, and that was murder trying to just deal with him. Eventually they said, we need to phone hotline, put it through the hotline. I says, why? I've told you. I says, get it recorded now. Because to me what they were trying to do was ignore it. To me that is really what they were trying to do, ignore what must have happened to this boy. So anyway, I phoned and I got it recorded, and I said, right, Janice, he's recorded. What I should have done was, I should have got the police. I should just have got the police and brought the police down to my house and say, look at the state of him. He's been given to me by a home who are denying that he had it. So he stayed with me, took him back on the Sunday night, and I went like that. I says to him, right, I want to know what happened to this boy. Why is he like this? Why is he covered in bruising? Like, you gave him out to me on Friday, and you never even cracked a light that his body was like that. To which I got no reaction at all. So what happened was, Monday morning came along, and this is the strangest thing, but this is the social work at their best. The social work phoned me at my work, and they say, we need you at the Mallard, John. I says, what for? I says, we're taking John through to the doctors in Cumbernauld, a Dr. Bergen. And I'm like that, well, why can't you take him? Oh, well, we can't, we don't have the authority. Also, his mother's went away on holiday. I said, so we need you. And I'm like, why? Why? You're the social work. You can do whatever the hell you want. They were like, oh, we can't take him out. We need you to get him. I says, and if you need me to get him, where are you going to be? Oh, we'll be through and coming all waiting for you. So I'm like, nah, this doesn't sound right. So I phoned up my partner Janice, and I says, Janice, what are you doing? You busy? She says, oh, no bad. I says, well, shut the shop. I says, I need you. And she says, what for? I says, I'm getting set up. I says, I really think this is a set up, and I have to take John from the Mallard to Cumbernauld. I says, to see a doctor. I says, but strange thing is, there's two social workers, one of them, Angela Gillis, has been at the Mallard, and I can't understand why they're not taking him. They want me to take him. So I went away through to Kilsyth. I phoned my lawyer and I informed him what was happening that day. And I said, look, Tony, his name was Tony Callan, sorry, he worked in Cambuslang, and he was like, well, get Janice to come, you make sure you don't hurt him, don't bang him, don't do nothing at all, make sure you get him through there in one piece. So anyway, I got Janice and we went up to the Mallard. So strange thing, got to the Mallard, doors open. I walked in and I says, I have to pick John up to take him to a doctor. The place was empty. No management, no nothing. So there was one wee girl sitting through in the TV lounge. I says, I have to pick John up to take him to a doctor. She says, oh, he's sitting in his room. So I went through and I'm like, where's the bosses in here? None of them were there. Nobody was there. The place was vacant, was it there? Except this one wee lassie working in there. So I got John, says to Janice, I says, wrap him in cotton wool. Do not bang his head, do not bang his arm, do not bang anything. Get him into that car, put your hand on his head, make sure you lower him and get him in there without banging anything, or we're in trouble. So got him ready, and John, happy to see us, come out to the car in the car. So right through to Cumbernauld Social Work Department, Cumbernauld Health Centre to meet Dr. Bergen, John's doctor. So we got there and we walked in, and here's these two social workers. And I'm like, what is your problem? Why didn't you take John here? Why did you get me to go up to that Mallard? I says, surely one of the Mallard staff should have accompanied you with John through to the doctors. But no, you made me do it. I says, why? I says, were you hoping I was going to make him fall? Or bang him? Or do something like that with his breath? And she went like that. No, it was nothing like that, John, at all. And she says, because your ex-wife isn't there, this is a strange thing about these orders, because your ex-wife isn't there, you've got to do it. Right? So we got to the doctors, and we're just sitting there and the wee light goes up, and there was Dr. Bergen, and I got up and she went like that, oh no, you wait there. I says, why? We want to go and see the doctor first. I says, why? They went like, well, just to explain. I says, you don't know what's happened here. So away they went, two social work went in, about seconds later they came out and says, Mr. Shields, you could come in now. So I walked in. They didn't know that me and the John's doctor were really good pals. And I went like, Ronnie, what the hell is going on here? He went like, he says, I don't know, he says, I've been approached by these two and they want me to diagnose the amount of bruisings in John's body and how he might have got it. He says, when did you have him? I says, on Friday. I says, it wasn't that colour. I says, it was there, the colours were all there. I says, but look at the colour of it now. I says, it's unbelievable. He says, it is. I says, what do you think? He says, well, this has happened maybe 48, 72 hours before you've got him, which means that's Friday. You're talking about maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, John's fell and hurt himself, or somebody has hurt him. And he says, well, they could have fell, banged himself, or somebody could have struck him. That was his words. And next minute, I'm away. I just took John home with me because it was Friday. I says he'll be staying with me the night. The doctor actually thought, because of the amount of bruisings that John was getting in the Mallard, that they thought he was suffering from leukemia, early leukemia, which, my bottle went. I went, oh no. I says, the amount of bruisings this boy's getting for this home, 161 log pages is just half it. It was like every day there was bruisings. How was he getting this? So they started blaming, because John's on anti-convulsion drugs, the Mallard started to blame the drugs. So I says, only way that we can deal with this is ask the doctor, and the doctor says, I'm going to test him anyway. He says, because he could be in early stages of leukemia, but the amount of bruisings that he's getting on his body doesn't explain this. He says, but what I'm reading here, he says, there's something wrong somewhere. So anyway, the tests were done and they come back negative. Good for me, good for John. He didn't have leukemia. Not good for the Mallard, because that was the Mallard claiming the anticonvulsant drugs were causing the bruisings. And that, to this day, we never got an answer of what had happened to John.
But from what you've described, it's clearly something extremely major, and there was never an answer.
No.
30th of April, because of this bruising, Child Protection Conference was held, Cumbernauld Social Work Department, Carn House, Cumbernauld Town Centre. Present were Eleanor Murray, Area Manager Chair, David Fletcher, Senior Social Worker, Fiona Cameron, Area Service Manager, Roger Baker, Social Worker, Angela Gillis, Social Worker, Louise McKenzie, Student Social Worker, Mary O'Brien, Head Teacher, Redburn School, Anne Allington, School Nurse, Redburn School, Mr. Russell, Unit Manager of the Mallard, and there were some apologies. Angela Gillis and Roger Baker voiced a concern regarding the time which had lapsed before the Social Work Department was contacted about the bruising to John. Another concern raised by both Angela Gillis and Roger Baker was the occurrence of such extensive bruising when the child was in the care of the Social Work Department and residing at a residential home, which is a fair point. Mary O'Brien from Redburn School stated that she spoke with Margaret at the Mallard on Monday morning, who informed her that she had not reported the incident and didn't think the bruises were very extensive. Mary states that on Monday John's leg was swollen and discoloured. Dr. Bergen felt it was possible John could have fallen to one side and been hit with a large object. It was suggested that the bruises could have been received whilst in the care of Mr. Shields. This was thought to be a possibility but could not be established. So again, they're in this conference where all the evidence says that you noticed the bruising, but you noticed the bruising the day that you picked him up from the Mallard. The bruising was clearly days old at that point. They'd bathed them, so they must have known. So there's all of these signs that says the problem's in the Mallard. And yet they're suggesting, we can't establish it, we can't say for sure, but we're suggesting it might be the father, right? Which is, again, a pattern. Eleanor Murray felt the following concerns required to be noted. One, the failure to report the incident by the staff at the Mallard Centre and Redburn School. That's a bit odd because Redburn School did nothing wrong here. Redburn School did report what they found. The minimisation of the injuries following the recognition of the signs. She doesn't say by the Mallard, but that's what happened. Failure of medical attention at the Mallard/Redburn School. Judgments being made to the extent of the pain which was suffered, which influenced the decision on medical attention. So due to the above, a review of the appropriateness of the placement at the Mallard should be undertaken. There was no dissent. So even despite mud being thrown in general directions, they did come down to belatedly to the view that we need to think about whether the Mallard's actually working out here because this isn't good. Did anything come of that?
No, not a thing happened. I think I ended up attending a meeting which was just blatantly blaming everybody except the Mallard. One of the things as you stated there, the referral to the reporter, strange incident happened there when they had decided that John had to be referred to the reporter. I didn't know what that meant. Now, the reporter was actually based in Airdrie, and I phoned their office and I says who I was, what I was involved in. In fact, I discovered all this. I says, there's been a referral made to you by Cumbernauld Social Work Department on behalf of North Lanarkshire Council. I says, what happens now? And just as the boy was on the phone to me, strange thing, Mr. Shields, he says, we've just said North Lanarkshire Council in here who have decided there is no referral to us. They're dealing with it. and that took place, and that just made me say to myself, this is a cover-up. The fact that the reporter would have meant an investigation. North Lanarkshire didn't want the investigation. They already knew what had happened to John. They knew, as you described yourself there, they tried to blame me. Now, they didn't tell me this. Even I'm sitting in a meeting with them, maybe it was a few weeks later, at the Mallard, nobody mentioned who was getting blamed. There was no person getting isolated for doing this. I'm actually surprised, when I discovered that I was getting blamed for it. Because when John was bruised, that whole week I hadn't even seen him. And that was my argument. I went like, whoa, how are you trying to blame me when that full week John hadn't been near me? But then again, Mum had been there. Mum had taken him out swimming. Mum, through my daughter stating to me, John had fell in the swimming pool and hurt himself. She never told the Mallard that night when she brought him back that he'd hurt himself. But she went away, as you see there, she went away to Tenerife. She went away on a week's holiday to Tenerife when all this was happening. So she wasn't there to answer. Did John hurt himself when he was out with you? That would have saved a lot of hassle, a lot of problems, a lot of meetings if she'd been there to say that she had been involved in it. But when you think about it, the outcome of this is just one incident that went on in that Mallard. The outcome was John was put on the Child Protection Register. Unheard of in a care home. In a care home setting. They had to turn around and talk about the appropriateness of the placement at the Mallard. John should have been taken out of the Mallard. His mother should have acted as a mum and came forward and said, I've had enough of this. John's coming home with me. She should have taken John out of the home that day when she discovered that he was getting put on Child Protection Register. You're a parent. If your son is in a care home setting, being looked after 24/7, you've had issues of it looked like rape. Within 6 weeks, your son being in the place. And here you've got less than 4 months later, he's been put on Child Protection Register because of the suspected bruisings that nobody sees. Nobody notices. No reports are made about it. It's all hushed up. But then again, you've got to blame somebody. And that's where I come on. I was the one who was getting blamed. They wanted to blame me, but they could not get the blame to be put on me.
So, May the same year, Angela Gillis had a meeting with your ex-wife, Catherine Wilson, John's mother, to go over the event that had led to John Jr.'s name going on the Child Protection Register. Now, you said that she'd actually had him the week when he was injured, and there's a report from your daughter that he fell at the swimming pool, which may explain the bruising, but she didn't mention this. She said she would like John to stay at the Mallard every night at present. That is for his father to return him after access. No overnights at his father. The department said they would not pursue this, but that she might. So that's an odd comment that they're trying to get, suggesting that some of the conflict with you will be handled by your ex-wife. That's an interesting move. 2nd of May 96, Angela Gillis received a phone call from Sandy Russell, unit manager at the Mallard. She said, I left him in no doubt as to his responsibilities for John's care and the procedures. So she's obviously at least concerned by the Mallard, but no action's been taken. 11th of May 96, child protection referral made by John Garway, senior social worker. Referrer advised that it had been instructed by the area team to notify standby of any bruising to the above named child, John. Quote, John had access with his mother today, returning at about 5 p.m. His mother informed staff that John's behaviour had been aggressive today. On his return to the unit, John went out in the minibus. Staff said his behaviour in the bus was aggressive. Referrer bathed John tonight and observed some bruising which he wishes to report. 13th of May 96, there's a lot of it. 13th of May 96, social work standby record of referral by Vicky S. Benner, a team leader at the Mallard, who reported child returned from access with bruising. 3rd of February 97, social work, case notes. Telephone call from Sandy Russell. Sandy is concerned that Mr. Shields is making inquiries in reference to Mary Maguire, caseworker who was interviewed by FROS post childcare review 30th of November 95. So you're digging into what happened when he first went in. The Mallard's phoning social work and saying they're concerned that you're doing this. So we then get to June 97. All right, and there's a bit of correspondence which is quite striking in many ways. Before we get to that, is there anything you want to add that was happening around the latter part of 96 and the first half of 97? Is there anything you would want to throw in?
Yeah, during that period of time, you know, you've got a social work department who knew what had happened to John. You've always got to remember in the background, the local authority actually put John in there illegally. They could not afford this to come out, what was happening to John. We're talking about Angela Gillis here. Angela Gillis is a social worker who's in the reports when John was found to have internal bruising, was his buttocks checked for pressure points. She's the social worker asking the questions then why she was never informed that this had taken place. You know, she was the one that when this happened should have been phoned right away to say, John Shields Jr. has got internal bruising and it looks as though he's been raped. This is the way this should have dealt with. But the lady never had a chance because this was shut down as quick as lightning. I mean, and then after that, when you think about it, you've got these issues going on, child protection conferences and discussions. Now that's two within a period of 4 months that they're doing this, and then all of a sudden referrals to the reporter. You've got the referral reporter, and then all of a sudden you've got social work going in, taking full and utter control of what was happening here. You know, like my ex-wife, the reason that she was saying, don't send that boy home with him is because I was the one finding out what was happening to him. Mm. You know, that's the crazy thing about this, and this went on and on and on.
So, this takes us to 97. So there's a letter, a very extraordinary letter, from Safa Baxter Amin, Area Manager, Social Work Department, North Lanarkshire Council, to you. Quote, further to our meetings and telephone discussion, I write an apology at the distress which has been caused to you. As you know, I have acknowledged my department's failure to satisfactorily communicate with you over the case discussion issues in December 1995. I have unfortunately been unable to establish why this should have happened, but I can assure you that every effort will be made to keep you informed of any issues regarding John in the future. In the case discussion, as you know, it was concluded that the initial information received from the Mallard residential unit about the bruising led the department staff to believe that John may have been sexually abused. Subsequent discussion between staff of the Mallard and social work and police, education and health personnel, however, concluded that a perfectly appropriate explanation existed to rule out such a belief. Now there's more, but before I get to the more, so she's saying that the nonsense about sitting with his feet tucked under him and his shoes next to his backside not only was an alternative explanation for internal bruising of the rectum, but ruled out the possibility of it being sexual abuse. I find that an incredible statement. I mean, it's beyond incompetent. It's beyond negligent. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that.
Well, to be honest with you, this area I know very well because we had a meeting with Safa Baxter and she was very sorry everything was going, but that didn't cut ice for me because I still wanted to find out what happened to my son. I was actually stating I wanted a meeting with the man who ran the Mallard, Sandy Russell. This was a very secluded man who didn't like being challenged, didn't like answering questions. I actually joke that it took me years to get him to meet me face to face. And this did happen in my social work department and a new area manager chap by the name of Mike Burns. And I'd been at Mike because he was another one who appeared on the scene, thought, well, I can smooth this over, don't worry about it. I'll have a word with Mr. Shields, I'll tell him I've got everything in check. I'll make sure that this doesn't happen and this doesn't go any further. And then he approached me and I just shot him down in flames and told him, don't ever try to come and give me this bullshit about what happened to my son. I know what's happened to my son is serious. I says, and you've been defending and you've been covering up that home all this time to protect him from what was going on there. I says, no, John was a child who could not speak. He could not say what happened to himself. And this manager boy was more like our John. He didn't want to speak and he didn't want to say what happened to my son. I says, but eventually I did get him out of the Mallard and I got him into his office in Cumbernauld social work department, had a meeting with him, sat with him, and I kept asking him questions. How come every time something happened to my son, your report would be nothing happened? And in black and white, it did happen. I says, why did you always say nothing happened? No answer. And then Mike Burns would dive in and he would answer on his behalf, given this departmental crap. I says he would come out and it came to a stage that after 4 hours of being in that office, I couldn't get an answer out of this man. But Michael Burns would answer every question for him, to the extent I had to turn around and say, do us a favour, will you take your hands out of your arse and stop moving his mouth? I says, every time I ask for an answer, you answer for him. I says, all this is a cover-up of abuse, and you know that. I says, so this doesn't surprise me at all that when they turned round, because they knew it didn't matter what they'd done. I was never going to accept their answers to what happened to John.
So the letter from Safa Baxter, finishes, having established there was no reason to suspect such abuse. Again, I think that's an outlandish statement, but she says, having established there was no reason to suspect abuse, it was decided by staff involved at the time not to contact you about the matter. Right? So this lame excuse they've got was given as reason why they didn't contact you. 6th of October 1997, another letter from Safa Baxter, area manager, to your solicitor this time. This letter was sent, quote, in the hopes of putting this matter to rest. Right, so this is we want this to go away. You're being difficult. So it basically goes on and describes child protection procedures, and it goes on at one point. Your letter ends by asking whether your client, John, referring to you, was ever suspected of child abuse. As no grounds were ever established that child abuse occurred in the first place, it would not be we could not be in a position to suspect your client or any person in this respect. Regarding the question of internal bruising, I can only say that no medical explanation was ever made. In the conference at the time, there was lots of suggestions that it was somehow you, although it was never had any evidence or stated it very clearly. Safa Baxter's letter finishes, despite his attitude, this is talking about you, despite his attitude towards the staff in this department, social work, we have tried to involve him in the future planning of his son thus recognising his high level of commitment, care and bonding, which we would like to promote and foster further. So they recognise, right, whilst they don't like you because you're being mean to them, they recognise your high level of commitment, care and bonding with your son. I think that's interesting. What Mr. Shields now chooses to do is a matter for himself. I'm afraid I do not see I can offer any further clarification on this unhappy matter of the past. Trying to put it very firmly in the past. 23rd October 1997, social work standby service recorded a referral from John Galloway at the Mallard. It stated, John Shields is resident in Mallard, on home leave tonight with his dad. Dad phoned the unit 1655 to say John's a small bruise on the tip of his penis. John does not communicate, therefore is unable to say how this had happened. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, what happened was John arrived at the school. As I said, I think I've reiterated the fact that sometimes John was getting dragged out of school, out of his bed, taken. This was discovered later on. John was getting taken out of his bed at 7:30 in the morning. He was never getting the chance to be washed, cleaned right. He was getting taken on a taxi journey that was taking him almost 2 hours to get to school. I discovered that the taxi firm hired by the local authority were doing pickups.
It's only for 14 miles though.
Yeah, but this was going away out towards Hamilton, Bells Hill, and heading back into Cumbernauld. It was like a round, and it was taking about 2 hours, and then I was getting calls from Mary O'Brien, head teacher, like John's shattered, John's sleeping in the class, what's going on here? And I'm like, I've got a clue why he's acting like that. And then one of the problems that they had was during that period of time that he was travelling in his taxi, John was bursting for the toilet, needing a bowel movement. And one of the mornings, Mary had actually taken him into the toilet, and John wouldn't let her near him, which was very unusual because he knew Mary well. And I got a phone call and says, could you come down because John's in the toilet, bursting for the toilet, but he'll no do the toilet, and he will not let me touch him. So I says, okay. So I shot down to the school and I went in and I says, okay, where is he? And she says, he's in the boys' toilet. So I went in and there's John. And Janice had come down there with me as well. I was like, come down here and find out what the hell is going on here. I says, so I went in and there's John. He's standing at the toilet. I'm like, what's wrong? And he's like, and he's pointing down. And I pulled his trousers and I went like, oh my God. That wasn't just a wee bruise. The whole of the top of his penis was black and blue. And he couldn't do the toilet out of this. This was the problem that we were having here. So, because of the fact that he was bursting, he did eventually do the toilet, which hurted him. And we got it done. And I went out and I says to Mary O'Brien, what's happening to him? And she went like, I've got concerns here. I went like, I says, look, his penis is bruised. How the hell do you get that? Jam it in the door? I went like, I says, how the hell does that happen? As somebody pulled a zipper, it was bad. And she went like that, she says, I'll need to report this. I says, well, I'm here anyway. I've seen it. The nurse, it got to the stage at John's school that even the nurses wouldn't touch John. This is how serious this had got. The nurses that look after these disabled children would not touch John. Now, anybody that works in that sort of situation would realise we have got a problem here.
For fear of being accused?
A fear, yeah. And this is what was going on. And so I says to Mary, what do we do now? She says, okay, I'm going to have to phone social work. They're going to have to come down, witnesses, do whatever it is they do to do this procedure, and we'll wait. So we were down there. Now I'm down there about 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, no sign of social work. Social work come and all, didn't come near us. So I says to Mary, he's due to go back to the Mallard. What do? We don't know what's happened to him. She says, I'm going to have to phone education. So she phoned education, told education. They says, get a hold of where he lives, the Mallard. It is their responsibility. They've sent him out with this. So they're going to have to respond on what had happened to him. So we sat there and because the taxi came to pick him up to take him away. John didn't want to go, but legally I couldn't keep him. So I had to get him into the taxi. So they're in the taxi. So Mary O'Brien, the head teacher, phoned the home and says to them, what had happened? We haven't had social work. She was annoyed that social work didn't even bother to come down to see what happened to John. So she told the Mallard, when he comes back to that home, you take him right away to a doctor. The doctor was in Springburn Health Centre and John was registered there now, and as far as we knew, that's what had to happen. But through accessing paperwork, it didn't happen because he didn't go. They never even took him to the doctor. They brought him, kept him, and never even reported it, that this had happened. And then social work and Cumbernauld, they just didn't want anything to do with it by this time. They didn't want anything to do. I don't think they knew what to do here. Legally, they had no grounds to go and take John out because what was happening here was an absolute disaster for them. They didn't know what to do. You know, there was incidents come flying all the time. One of the times he was sent to school, he had a human bite mark on his arm, John. Human bite mark. You could count the teeth. It was that bad on his arm. And we were like, I was like, what the hell is happening here? So we had an idea that it must have been something that happened at the home, but it was never recorded. So they were told again, take him to a doctor. This time he was taken to a doctor and put on antibiotics because it had burst the skin. Now that's a human bite being covered up by this Church of Scotland home. You know, that for all the time I was in there, I would hate to think how many times this mob covered up what happened to my son.
So the next piece in the file that we've got is 24th of August 1998. What I want to talk about. So there's much more information. 24th of August 1998. Glasgow City Council wrote to you regarding investigation of your complaint of 22nd of June 98. Following receipt, they write, following receipt of detailed information from David Kellock, Church of Scotland, relating to the incident in question, and 2 visits to the Mallard by Tony Valbonesi, Senior Officer, Registration and Inspection. On 11th of August 98 and 17th of August 98, I write to inform you of our findings. Your son's daily log indicates you had visited on the evening of 19th October and bathed him. The staff communication, so this all the way back to 95, this is talking about. The staff communication book refers to you advising staff that you had ripped your son's pajama top so that his mother would not assume that it had been done by Mallard's staff. The City Council letter goes on to say the reason given by staff and management for not proceeding with a medical examination of the bruising was because it was felt by them and Mrs. Shields, who was contacted at the time, that possible explanation for the bruising was the most likely one, i.e. John sitting on his shoes while watching TV, and that the bruising was exacerbated by the medication he was on at the time. Now we now know, we've established that neither of these things were true. The medication was not responsible, and that your ex-wife has written to them and saying that she never agreed with this explanation. And then the City Council letter continues, unfortunately there's no indication of the severity of the bruising which may have assisted us in hindsight to evaluate the appropriateness of the staff's judgment to accept the above explanation and the decision not to seek medical advice at the time. That seems to be a bit of a cop-out, frankly. So you're trying to get, so you've approached Glasgow City Council to try and get an investigation, and that's not very impressive, shall we say. Do you recall anything about your interaction with Glasgow City Council?
Yeah, I remember when I think I'd had enough of all the stories and that were coming out for the Mallard social work department. So what happened was I contacted the inspection and registration department, which was based down in Brigton in Glasgow, and I'd asked them, would you go up to the Mallard and investigate thoroughly what's happened to John over the years that he's been staying in this place. The two people, one was Jim Gibb and Tony Valbaresi, they says, okay, yeah, we'll go up and we'll see what the score is. So next minute they phoned me up and they say to me, oh, we went up the other day, we phoned and told them we want a meeting at the Mallard to see what happened to John. And I went like, I says, what do you mean you phoned them up? I says, does that not give them a warning telling them that you're coming to visit to see what's happening? Why don't you just go up, visit off the cuff and find out what happened to my son? That's what I would do. All you've done is tell them that you're coming up with a marching band and they'll know they're coming, so they've got the answers ready for you. So all of a sudden they went there and all of a sudden they come back saying, oh, there's nothing happened to John. No, look, nothing happened to John. Look at what's happening here to John. Eventually an investigation by this Jim Gibb was carried out by Glasgow City Council into what happened at the Mallard, especially the assaults and the bruising, and then all of a sudden whistleblower named a carer who worked in the place that he had been assaulting 3 children who had severe learning disabilities. Now, Glasgow City Council knew who he was. They knew he worked in there. To be honest with you, later on in a police investigation that was discovered, he was John's team leader, had been there for 4 years. Now this man knew my son, knew he worked in there. He's on this report, and the strangest thing was, instead of arresting this man and taking him in for questioning, the church took him out and sent him away to work with adults with learning disabilities. Now, he's assaulted 3 children. Whistleblowed that he'd been assaulting children. And here we've got the Church of Scotland covering it up, taking him and putting him in another home to look after adults with learning disabilities. This I could not believe. But when I seen the report that they'd done, Glasgow City Council became that they were doing whatever they could to stop this from coming out. They just joined the club. I think myself and my partner, we were shocked. We went on holiday, come back for a week's holiday to find out that John had been wetting himself, doing bowel movements all over the place. His room was stinking. We walked into his bedroom within the Mallard, and here I couldn't breathe. It was a heat wave, and here's my son sitting in his room. The room was stinking of urine. I mean, it was catching your throat. And I'm like, he cannot stay here. I think I took him home with me. I just could not let him stay there. They had him sleeping in a heat wave in a room that stunk of urine. It was minging. And I said, I'm reporting this, which I did. I reported it to health and safety. I said, and within a week, this Mallard room had been redecorated, recarpeted, everything in it redone. This was a wee boy who, when he was in the toilet, he was going into his cupboard, opening the door of his cupboard, and urinating it, peeing in it. He was waiting in his toy box, he was waiting in his bed in the corner. The thing that was wrong, David, was John would not enter the toilet area facility in this home. He wouldn't go through the door. He wouldn't go in there to do the toilet. He was toileting in his bedroom. Now, I know that's a cry for help. I know that's a problem. That is a boy who is being abused badly. When he refuses to go into a toilet, the area, if I put a picture in the Mallard, it's a big toilet area. It's huge. It's got a table we rely on, like, you know, and I say the shower area, toilet area, you know, it's all one big confined area. But my son was terrified of that. He was terrified to get in. This is where it came about, when he was terrified, when he was out and about, he was scared to get into toilets. He always thought, he gets in there, he gets abused. That was what was going through my son's head. As I said, this was going on right through, so we know, like, my sister, Kay, as I say, she's supported me right through this. God bless her, like, she's really been with me. She could not believe that this was happening to John. And I says to her one day, why don't you travel down and come in and see for yourself what's happening to your nephew? Her and my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law, he was supplying me with T-shirts. He worked with a brewery firm where he got the T-shirts. And he was bringing me packets of them, and I'm taking them through for my son. And all he was doing was eating them. Now here's a point when my sister came in, and she walked into this home, and she walked into John's room, and John sat there and he looked at her. My sister started crying. She just burst out crying. She couldn't believe what she was looking at. This boy was like a vegetable. He didn't want to do nothing. He didn't want to move anywhere. He didn't want to even come to me, and I was his father, because of what was happening to him in this home. This was there for them to see. This is no bitterness. This home is wrong. It's a wrong place. It's the wrong place to be sending children like John. I think me and my partner Janice, when sometimes we were in there, we would have new members of staff would come into the place, they'd sit down and they would introduce themselves to me, and I'd go at them, oh aye, what do you do? I says, you work with learning disabilities most of your life? No. I says, what do you mean no? I says, oh no, in church, and Senny Job's gone. The next minute they're working in a home for learning disability children, giving them medication, looking after children who take seizures. I says, these people had never been trained. This is what this home was. And they were getting, it was more like a money-making exercise than anything, because the money they were getting was astronomical for looking after children. We seen stuff that happened in that home. There used to be one young lassie in there. I used to wonder why she was there, but she was an aggressive girl. And this wee girl, she was going through puberty. And I swear to this day, hand up, something was happening to this girl. She was doing things that a girl with learning disability goes to special school shouldn't be doing. She was going up and flashing herself at windows to wee boys that were outside in the home, and it wasn't getting stopped. This was happening in this place. As I said, that was really, that is when it got to the stage that I couldn't take any more. I was heading for a breakdown. I says, and I needed proof of what was happening in here. And eventually, when I went on holiday, the holiday was to give me a break. But when I was away, all I done was worry. I just worried about my son. I wondered what I was going to go back to. But when I did go back, there was a wee boy who, for I don't know many weeks, when my wife can help me with about a month, had been breaking every rule, or everything that he'd learned had gone. He just was not my son. He was a shadow of a wee boy. You know what I mean? He didn't want to do nothing. But when you look back on the period of 4 years in that home, we've had the school, we've had myself, we've had social work, we've had police, we've had doctors, we've had everybody involved trying to find out what happened to my son. And the long and short of it, David, is like John suffered severe abuse. And it wasn't until I accessed these files and I managed to get a file which is about 4 or 5 inches thick, and it is full of details about what happened to my son. I says, until I got there, I didn't realise how bad it was. The 160 odd reports of bruisings on his body, that's no fiction, that's truth.
Well, I mean, we've going through these injury logs, some of the comments, I'll just quickly read a few, just to substantiate what you said there. John's been sucking his jumper a lot, he's been chewing his pyjamas, sucking his clothes. John's bed was soiled this morning, still chewing his clothes. He's soiled tonight. He's up continually during the night. He would not settle. Eventually he got up and dressed at 5:15. He went into his room and lay in his bed, cuddled up.
This bit of who he cuddled up to, David, was a wee boy with cerebral palsy. He used to sleep next door to John. And John has went in and cuddled into him for security and safety. That happened when I was away.
And on it goes. Constant references to chewing shirts, chewing clothes, soiling himself, and on it goes. Just before we complete this part of the interview, John, you told me, and I'd like you to record this as well, of how you used to go to get him settled at night when you took him back. You would stay. Could you describe how that went? Well, you would stay until he got to sleep.
When we knew there was a problem, we suffered a couple of incidents with John when we were taking him back to the Mallard after just a visitation, whatever. John would get ready and go like, when we stayed in Moody's Burn, we were like, right John, come on, you need to go. There would be a fight to get him out, and I said, why is he doing this? It used to be like, he never ever tried to hold himself back from going anywhere. One of the main incidents that we had with John was we'd taken him back to the Mallard, and he was sitting in the back of the car, and I said, right, come on son, out you come, let's go. No, John wouldn't move. He had his arm round the head rest, and he was holding it, and you couldn't free him, because being a boy with learning disability, he can summon up strength. Don't know where it comes from, but he can have it. And he's going, and I'm like, what's wrong with him? Why is he doing this? And he didn't want to go out of this car. And eventually, he's crying, and I've never seen John cry. And here he is in the back of the car crying away. And I like Janice, I said, oh, come on, what is this? So I take into the Mallard and say, why is he acting like this in my car? And they went like, oh, you don't know, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, I need help to get him out, because he's not coming out. 5 days it took to get him out the car. When we got him out the car, he went to the front door of the place, and he wouldn't get in the door. And I kept saying, and I think it was Margaret Forbes who was the assistant in there, and I says to her, why is he doing this? I said, I've never seen him react like this. I said, since I've come back, I said, and I've seen what this boy's went through, what is wrong here? And she wouldn't answer me. And we couldn't get John through the front door. The strength this boy had was unbelievable. As I went like to Janice, I said, what are we going to do here? And she says, well, we can't take him away because they'll just blame us. And I went like, that's very true. So anyway, next minute, I turned round, and there was my son like a whippet. He ran into the home, he ran up the corridor, he ran, that's the shape, and then he went into his room, like 100 mile an hour, into his room. And then I went like that, I stood there and I said, right, what is happening to him? They didn't give me an answer. And then a strange thing happened, John came out, and he started walking back up the hallway. He was shouting, he was wanting me, but he had his back against the wall. And I'm like, why is he doing that? He was terrified of getting back in there because something bad was going to happen to him. To walk up a corridor with your back against the wall, I've never seen anybody do that before in my life, never mind my son. And he's doing this. And I'm saying to the Mallard staff, what is going on here? And it just came to the stage after that, I had to tell Janice, like, I said, I can't handle this anymore. I says, he's got to come out of here. And I just made that decision then. I says, I've had enough. So I went to social work, come and all, and I says, John is coming home with me. He's coming out, you can do whatever the hell you want. You can take me to court, you can do anything. I expected him to take me to court to stop me. I expected a challenge from my ex-wife. I says, he is coming. And then it just went like that, arranged, and then I was to a meeting with Cumbernauld Social Work Department, and they're like, oh well, this is a strange thing we're talking about, these section orders. all of a sudden, they were all over me like a rash. Going to do it. Now, John wasn't even 16, so even that area being an adult didn't come into this. We're sitting there and I'm like, John is coming home with me. They says, you've got to give 3 months notice. I says, this is June, just back for holiday. There's your notice, 3 months, he's out. Eventually, it would take us up to November, when it would be July, August, September, October, by November. And I made a point of making sure that I took John out on the 4th of November, which is this, in, 4 years to the day that they took him into full local authority care, or the 2nd of November, sorry. That is when he was coming home with me. But then I just had it with them all. I said, I'm no doing that. So even sitting in with Cumbernauld Social Work Department, it's strange you're talking about, they're going on there, these case conferences, can we do this, can we do that, Mr. Shields, you challenge this, Mr. Shields, you do this. And eventually it came, nobody challenged me. This is how I know this was a farce. This was just one cover-up that didn't work for the social work department. It just didn't work. We had one almighty farce going on here. Next minute it was, what can we do for Mr. Shields? What can we do for him and Janice? Janice was accused of stuff. Now here they want to do things to help me and Janice. Look after John. Put things to help us with John. This was it. And I'm like that. I said, beat it. I'll do it myself. Eventually we had a big meeting at Cumbernauld Social Work. I sat down there. And this is a mob that hated me. This is a mob that didn't want anything to do with me. This was a mob that was scared to take me to court. Now you're sitting with these senior social workers, and the greatest thing was my ex-wife. Now this is a woman who was meant to have been in charge of John. She done nothing. She just stood up, walked out, turned around and said, oh no, I'll be an effing babysitter for A2, and walked out the door and left us. Now she'd done this in front of the social work department. And for 5 years she done nothing for John.
Oh, right, okay.
She didn't come near John. She didn't want to see John. She didn't want anything to do with her son. Because this is when we knew the sections 25 care order, 25 local authority care was a load of rubbish. It meant nothing.
So we'll end that. We'll end this interview at that point. So the 2nd of November 1999, 4 years today, as you said, you and a social worker, Jim Kerr, went to the Mallard and removed John Jr. from the home. The final entry in the Mallard daily logs reads, 2/11/99, John came in from school and watched TV before his dad came to take him home.